Well, well, well. Look what I found.
Because just like so many others that have stood and spoke before you, my family, my children, my husband, myself are victims of the cruel practices that seem to follow Dr. Debra Jenson everywhere she goes. The trauma, the pain, the agony of having your child ripped from your arms and taken away from you, all while being wrongly and falsely accused, is indescribable. Debra Jenson's word, without ever having met me, my life, my family's life, turned into a living, breathing nightmare. And it's a nightmare that never ends. We can't hear a car door close outside my home without jumping. We freeze at any knock at our front door, fearing the police are behind it when it's opened. We find ourselves clutching onto our boys and checking on them constantly, just to make sure that they are really still there with us, even if we know they're totally safe. How long will families need to be torn apart and victimized by Debra Jenson? How long will she be allowed to traumatize and hurt innocent people? This nightmare needs to come to an end, and everyone needs to open their eyes, their ears, their hearts. What if that was your child, your life, your everyday everything torn apart so quickly? As for us, the parents, the children who are taken, the families torn apart, we aren't going anywhere. This needs to come to an end. And the nightmare that is Dr. Jenson needs to be stopped. So thank you for your time, and thank you for that update. But for right now, they're just words. No real action has been taken. Do better.
I am sick with a rare genetic disease and am no stranger to false allegations. Although I have never been medically kidnapped, a doctor at a different hospital accused me of faking my illness close to a decade ago. Although that doctor was proven wrong fairly quickly, the weeks surrounding that false allegation were extremely traumatic and some of the worst weeks of my life. What I experienced is only one small fraction of what these families here have gone through. Since 2016, I have been running a support group in the Lehigh Valley for those affected by the same genetic disorder I have. In 2020, a mother who attends our support group reached out to me and told me her child was taken from her. She was being accused of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. I was in shock. I knew for a fact that this mother was innocent and that her child was in fact sick. I thought the accusing doctor must have made a mistake since this child's medical history was so complex. I really thought things would be resolved quickly and since the family was innocent. I was extremely wrong. A few months later, another local family with the same genetic disorder was falsely accused of Munchausen syndrome by proxy by the same doctor, Debra Jenson. I was in complete disbelief. I started researching this doctor and found out about her criminal history in New York and Florida.
69 News reporter Blakely McHugh looked into that doctor's history and did find evidence of overturned diagnoses. She also found that the vast majority of child abuse reports in Pennsylvania do get dismissed for one reason or another. Here's Blakely with part 3.
There's families out there that are completely destroyed over these kinds of allegations.
But complaints about Dr. Jenson's alleged over-reporting date back to her time as a pediatrician in New York. In a 2009 case, court records show she diagnosed an infant with shaken baby syndrome. When the diagnosis was contested in court, 3 out of the 4 experts agreed that the child suffered some form of meningitis. Dr. Jenson was the only doctor who testified it was shaken baby syndrome. In 2010, Dr. Jenson saw a child who stopped breathing and also attributed it to shaken baby syndrome. That child died and his brother was taken from the home for nearly 3 months over the child abuse claims. A final autopsy concluded the baby's death was caused by a rare heart defect, not by the parents. And in another case in 2012, Dr. Jenson's claims of child abuse were dismissed, with the judge saying, quote, Dr. Jenson was clearly mistaken in her diagnosis. Further adding, quote, it is tragic that a medical misdiagnosis and an inappropriate rush to judgment resulted in these loving, caring, dedicated parents being separated from their sickly child. After New York, Jenson was employed by the University of Florida and worked with the child protection team in the state. During her time there, she was the subject of multiple complaints, at least one of them over her findings of possible abuse. Jenson was later reassigned to a non-CPT position in January of 2014. She then made her way to LVH in August of 2014, working in general pediatrics with an emphasis in child protective medicine.
We asked the hospital if they had any plans to look into these claims. They said, quote, LVHN evaluates and re-evaluates clinical cases and will continue to do so as appropriate. They also said the judicial system and child protective services make the final decision in these cases. A medical examination is only one component among many factors.
I honestly could not believe this doctor was even allowed to practice medicine, let alone have the power that she does at LVHN. I started posting about her on social media and was contacted by multiple families that were going through the exact same thing. What Debra Jenson puts these innocent families through is horrific. Tonight, I would like to highlight 5 long-lasting effects that these false allegations have on medically complex children. 1. Debra Jenson stops treatments that these children actually need. When she does this, the kids get worse. She refuses to listen to them and lets them continue to decline. When you have a complex disease, you can often never get back to your baseline after a decline like that. What she does to these children is reckless and unethical. 2, after going through a medical kidnapping, children lose trust in doctors and in the medical system. They often avoid seeking medical treatment, which causes their health to decline even more. They're terrified of being taken again. 3, after a medical kidnapping, children develop a variety of mental illnesses such as anxiety, depression, and PTSD. I've spoken with medical kidnapping victims from here and from different states, and the trauma follows them until their adult lives.
I'm just pointing out this is exactly what happened to Maya Kowalski. These are exactly the diagnoses that she has: depression, anxiety, PTSD.
Many have told me they were never the same after being medically kidnapped. 4, doctors do not take these children seriously anymore when they do seek care. This often leads to unnecessary physical and mental suffering and declines in physical and mental health. When a diagnosis like Munchausen syndrome is in your records, doctors often refuse to treat you. Imagine being sick and needing care, but you keep getting turned away by doctors because of one false allegation. 5, schools don't take these children seriously anymore. Even when proven innocent, schools are often not notified of these families' innocence. Faculty and students often treat these children like they are liars. Any accommodations that were previously put in place aren't honored, and these children are often bullied and ostracized. I would like to end by stating that you have the power to stop what is happening here. These parents shouldn't have to fight this hard for change. We, the community, have voiced our concerns at multiple meetings and protests, yet you are still funding the destruction of innocent families. You are allowing this to continue happening, and I'm wondering why. And I'm sure these families would like to know as well.
I am very concerned with the way that the counties work with county CYS functions here in Lehigh County. And my concern is that my son has a genetic condition called osteogenesis imperfecta, which is brittle bone disorder. That essentially means that my child, being the tiny little 3-year-old goofball that he is, could break a bone running around the house. Heck, he broke a bone tripping over a pillow. Okay, he broke his foot. Can you imagine, with what you've heard from the stories from these families, walking into an ER and being like, hey, my son broke his foot tripping over a pillow? My concern is that I could have all of the evidence in the world backing up his diagnosis, and it wouldn't make a shred of difference within Lehigh Valley Hospital and with Lehigh County CYS. It wouldn't. It honestly would. And as a nurse, that terrifies me for families. As a nurse who is concerned about maybe families of possibly a lower socioeconomic status, or people who don't have the education that I have, or anything of that don't know how to defend themselves and can't speak up. I could barely speak up through the whole process. And granted, I didn't have to deal with Lehigh County CYS aside from the first person who came to see me at the hospital who had to lay eyes on me and Patrick. And the first words out of his mouth was, so when do you think you're going to file for divorce from your husband? That should never be somebody's first thing. So you've basically, from the moment we were in that hospital, you decided he did it, he's guilty. It is guilty until proven innocent in these situations, and that is not the way it should be. Imagine families who are getting torn apart and their lives ripped to shreds because they can't afford to fight. They can't afford it. The families that you see before you sitting here,
Preach.
many of them have spent thousands of dollars on legal fees.
Preach.
And the reason that their cases were unfounded and the reason that they were able to get to this point to be able to speak to you is because they could afford to fight it.
Yep.
That's terrifying.
What is the plan to assure that CYS stops taking children from kind and loving families over a doctor's unsupportable allegations of abuse? Are you okay with innocent people spending time in jail because Jenson, for example, harasses the DAs, the detectives, the officers, insisting that cases be pursued? Cases which are dismissed months later by judges once they realize there was no basis to the case, although innocent parents sat in jail waiting for the truth to set them free. To reiterate what I said 2 weeks ago, destroying their lives, their reputations, losing their jobs. Are you truly okay with that? Are you okay with a Lehigh County government agency being weaponized by a bunch of doctors who have their own agenda bent on taking children from parents and sending revenue right back to LVHN? Are you okay with taxpayer money being wasted on needless services put in place by CYS solely to satisfy doctors at LVH? Are you okay using taxpayer dollars to pay the salaries of judges who are being used as tools to generate revenue for the hospital and CYS contracted service providers? Why are children being given exams for sexual abuse when no such abuse was alleged? Do you understand that parents have been threatened by Jenson that CYS will remove their children if they do not allow pictures of their children's genitals to be taken?
Oh my God.
Did you know that your CYS solicitors pursue bogus cases with full knowledge of Jenson's checked past in both New York and Florida? And the packets that you received last week with that information have been widely circulated throughout Lehigh County for years. I don't understand why would any taxpayer dollars, my own included, be spent to pay these solicitors to pursue these absolute garbage cases?
I only have a couple things to say. This is a handful of people here. If we could truly get all the people that this Dr. Jenson has done over, you'd be here for weeks and weeks and weeks. You need to put a stop to this doctor. She is ruining people's lives. This isn't just going for 1 week, 2 weeks. This has been going on for decades. She terrorized New York, terrorized Florida, and now miraculously, she's terrorizing the Lehigh Valley. And I think it's a shame people have to be scared to take their children to a doctor. That's all I have to say.
The first time that I was ever in a courtroom was at my then 11-year-old daughter's emergency shelter care hearing. My court-appointed attorney in Northampton County told me that everyone in Northampton and the surrounding counties knew about Jenson's long history of false allegations of child abuse. That was surprising. Imagine my second surprise when I found out that the court-appointed attorney's husband in Northampton, my court-appointed attorney from Northampton has a husband who is a solicitor for CYS, prosecuting families in Lehigh County. My daughters had a pleasant and caring court-appointed attorney in Northampton. Again, imagine my surprise when I found out that his wife is the deputy solicitor for children and youth in Lehigh County. How is this acceptable? Isn't this a conflict of interest? How can anyone be treated fairly in this circular system?
I did come home with my son, but we also came home with bad memories. I still have not taken my child back to any
Trauma.
hospital, any of my 7 children.
Trauma.
I don't know if I can even. It just shouldn't have been. We need to stop it. And I ask now, what are we really doing? And when is this going to stop?
What is done in the dark will be brought to the light.